Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to a session on analytical hierarchies in your cubes. I hope you'll find this session worthwhile. My name is Tim Peterson. I'm an independent mentor working with SolidQ. I have about 75% of my business in the United States and the other 25% here in Scandinavia. This is the third time I've spoken at the SQLRally Nordic. I'm very grateful for being invited back. I love coming to Scandinavia. One thing about that, though, is that I spoke at the conference in Scandinavia in Stockholm a year and a half ago, and this is actually the same presentation I gave a year and a half ago. So if some of you were there and you don't want the slightly updated, slightly improved version of the same presentation, it's fine if you want to go and find another session to attend during this period. But if this might, I realize this might be a very new topic to some of you. It might be something that you've worked with before. I hope that I can make it beneficial to you wherever you are in terms of your knowledge of analytical hierarchies. My specialty in the field is in analysis services multidimensional and the MDX language. I wrote SolidQ's 2 courses on MDX, the introductory course and an advanced course. And this presentation is really, it has a lot to do with MDX. Because to build analytical hierarchies, to work with analytical hierarchies, you need to know something about MDX. The goals that I have for the presentation, first of all, I want to just explain what I mean by analytical hierarchies. I want to show you them in practice. Really, in my experience in working with a large number of companies, and of course in teaching individuals who are working with analysis services, in my experience, a lot of people who use analysis services multidimensional never make use of an analytical hierarchy. And they maybe don't even know what an analytical hierarchy is. And I think that's unfortunate because if you are working with analysis services multidimensional, analytical hierarchies give you a way to multiply the effectiveness and what you can provide your users with the information in your cube. So I really want to, the purpose of this presentation is really to get you thinking about this and thinking that is wondering if this could be an opportunity for your cubes, or even if you are using analytical hierarchies already, if there's some other places that you could use them, you could extend them, you could make them more effective. And then I'm going to give you an introductory class on how to create analytical hierarchies. I can't do too much in that way in an hour, and this does involve using MDX. So I guess the focus really is on, again, to demonstrate how it can be done, and again, to give you the idea, this isn't rocket science. And, people are sometimes intimidated by MDX. They could be intimidated by analytical hierarchies. And of course, the first time you use it, you get a period in the wrong place, you're missing a comma, you're missing a parentheses or a squiggly bracket, and the thing doesn't work. But really, MDX is not that hard. You can do this if you want to do it. And I hope that I can help you, persuade you at least a little bit in that regard in this session today. So, an analytical hierarchy, normally hierarchies subdivide the data. You have 2012 data, 2013, 2014, 2015. You have different products, you have different geographies, whatever you have in your cube, you're subdividing the data. But an analytical hierarchy, you're providing a calculation in the hierarchy so that each member of the hierarchy applies this calculation to whatever else is being used in the cube. You can create calculations with MDX and put them inside your cube, calculated measures or calculated members in other hierarchies. But calculated measures are, of course, they're very important, but they're very limiting because they only apply to a little piece of the data at a time. But with a calculation hierarchy, let's say that I want to do something like a year-to-date. And I have year-to-date sales, I have year-to-date expenses, I have year-to-date profit. I mean, I can make all those different measures as calculated measures, or else I can make a single calculated hierarchy that has year-to-date as one of its members. And I can apply that calculation to whatever measure is being used. That can be very significant in places where, some cubes that I've seen, there can be hundreds. In some cases, I've seen several hundred measures, all basically doing the same thing, which could be done better with a calculation hierarchy. Let me show this to you. And just one thing about my presentation today, after the conference is over, I've been told in a week or two or something, they're going to have all this material available that you can download. You can download videos of the presentations, and you can also download the PowerPoints. In my case, I'm going to be demoing most of the things I'm talking about, but my demos are kind of also in the slides. So, as long as my demos work, I'll use the demos and I won't spend much time on the slides. If something goes wrong, the slides are there that I can talk about things anyway. So, okay. I have an Excel file here, the pivot table, hooked up to a cube. And I'm just going to start by demonstrating what you do if you don't have analytical hierarchies. I've got internet sales goal, I've got internet sales trend, I've got internet tax trend, reseller sales goal, reseller sales trend, reseller tax. So I have all these as separate calculations. And I have a notepad here, which I pulled this out into Notepad because hey, you can see that really well. And this is how we do this sort of thing. We just create a measure for internet sales trend, do this little MDX here. We take the average of, we go for the 12 months, and we take the average and of internet sales amount. But then, of course, that just gives me internet sales amount. So then I have to do the same thing for internet tax amount, and I do the same thing for reseller sales amount, and basically you just go on and you create more and more calculations for any measure that you want this to apply to, and then I go down and do the same thing for the goal. I'm saying, well, I'm going to take the last 12 months, the sales trend, I'm going to multiply that by 1.2, take, say, 20% higher, whatever you sold, that's going to be the goal for the coming period. Obviously, that's a lot simpler than what most businesses would set their goals. But a lot of businesses do set their goals, or they set their targets in some sort of way like that, usually more complicated, but you can certainly get the idea with this. What it looks like with the analytical hierarchy is I don't have those as separate calculated measures. Instead, what I need to do is I need to come up here and pull out the real measures. So I have internet sales amount, internet tax amount, and reseller sales amount, reseller tax amount. And then I can do different things with this, but I'm going to flip them over, put them on the rows. And then I have a calculation hierarchy that I'm going to use that's called sales trend and incentive goal. And let's see, I really want that to show that on columns. So here, instead of creating a separate calculation for the 3-year trend and for the incentive goal, for each one of my measures, I create the calculation once, and then I apply it to each of the measures. There's something about that with efficiency, that it's less code to write. I don't really care so much whether it's more or less code. Yeah, of course that's important. But what's really important is that it allows users, when they're browsing the cube, to have more flexibility. You know, if we did it the way like this, which of course is very common, I can show it on columns, I can show the values down here on rows, but I can't pivot the actual trend and goal over against the measures and the different time periods. Here, you know, not only can I pivot them, well, I can if I want. I can go and put them down on the same axis and show the actual 3-year trend. I can put them in different orders so that, you know, so we see the values, each of the values with their 3 calculations. I can take it and put it up in the filter and say, okay, I want to just see the incentive goals. And I can move around among these. That, of course, why did people invent this cube stuff in the first place? So you could do this sort of thing. So you could, an analyst could go around, he could try this, he could try that, he could choose different sorts of filtering, put different things on columns, rows, and the filters, combine things in whatever way they want. Well, with a calculation hierarchy, you give your users the ability to combine their calculations in every way they want, rather than saying, oh, well, yes, now, let's see, I need a 6-month trend. You've given me a 12-month trend for profit and for sales but now I want a 6-month trend. No, you build a calculation hierarchy, you give them everything that they want, and you give it in a way that's flexible for them to use. Now, just let me show you real quickly. I'm going to be going over this later in the demo, but I do have the code here that shows how to make this calculation hierarchy. And again, both these sets of code, these crate measures that are shown here, these exist inside the cube. But here's the code for the calculation hierarchy. And yeah, I mean, it looks a little more strange, but basically the idea of it, we start out setting things to null, some good initialization. Then we say, then we choose the measures that we want to apply our calculation to. And of course, in this case, I'm applying it to these 4 measures. You know, that part is actually optional. You can take calculations. In fact, I've often taken calculations and applied them to all the measures in the cube. So then, you know, then you don't even need to say the measures. But sometimes some measures don't work with a calculation. So then you can include them or exclude them as is appropriate. So then we have this type of code that you notice it's, well, actually, I have a slight variation here. In the calculations, I was using the average function from MDX. Here, I'm taking the sum divided by the count, which is close to the same thing, but there is a subtle difference. I actually prefer, my typical advice to people is don't use average. Use sum divided by count. It's a little bit better. But the key thing isn't that the key is that I'm only doing this calculation. I'm only writing this calculation once, and then it's going to be applied to all the measures through the calculation hierarchy. And then here's the second one. I'm applying the goal, and then I'm just taking the key value number 30 is the goal. The key number 20 was the trend, and I'm just multiplying by 1.2, and that's all it takes. Well, almost. I do have to reapply the format for whatever reason. Sometimes, not always, but actually most of the time, formatting is lost in analysis services when a calculation is applied to a measure through a calculation hierarchy. I'm not sure why that happens. It doesn't always happen. But as you know, I usually have to put this little line back in here again. Yeah, we have to reapply the format. You notice we did a similar thing with the separate calculations. There, of course, we have to provide the format string with every single individual calculation that was done. Okay, so that's a quick introduction on how it's done. There'll be much more on that later. But now I want to go back and show the most common type of calculation hierarchy, and that is one that relates to time. And there is a wizard inside of analysis services in the data tools that allows you to create a time hierarchy. I don't use that wizard. It's very good as a learning tool. In fact, that's how I got started with calculation hierarchies. But there's a lot of information out there about calculation hierarchies, which it's actually, it works. There are better ways of doing it than using the wizard, though certainly to get started, it's a wonderful thing to have. So here I have two calculation hierarchies, one called select date period. And the second one called select date type. And let's see. So the periods, I'm using a modified form of AdventureWorks here. AdventureWorks has 3 dates. There's an order date, a ship date, and a delivery date. And then I'm applying various calculations, and I see that I actually have that filtered right now, which I don't want that. I want to see all the calculations, and I'll put the date periods up here on the, no, wrong way. I want the date types on the columns too. There it is. You can see all the data there. So for each of the 3 dates that we happen to have in the AdventureWorks database, and I've done installations on this where we've done this with 25 different dates. Pick your date, and we'll give you the calculation for the measure. Whatever calculation you want, whatever measure you want, whatever type of date you want, you can pick it, and we'll show it to you. So I look at these types of date calculations as being of different types. The first one, none selected, is the default member of the calculation hierarchy. Every calculation hierarchy has to have a default member. In the previous one I showed you, it was actuals. Well, if we're not using the hierarchy, we just want the value that it is, And in this case, for the date, if we don't select a particular type of date calculation, that's why I call it none selected. I'm always looking for a better thing to call it. It doesn't feel quite right, but it's the best I've been able to come up with. If I don't select any type of date calculation, I'm just seeing the way things are. Then current year, current month, and current 4 months only show the data for that particular time period. Now, a lot of places where I've worked, when they look at their cubes, they look at their data, they only want to see the current year, or they only want to see, or not only, they usually only want to see the current year, or they only want to see the current month, or they only want to see the last 7 days. Well, I can give you a calculation hierarchy that allows you to look at all your data from just that limited perspective. And the way this is, it's usually not used like I'm showing it right here on the screen. The way this is usually used looks like this. I'm going to put date period up in my filters. I'm going to put date types up in my filters. And I'm going to say I want the order date. And of course, I know these are the default values. But I'm going to say I want to show, let's see. I want to just show, say, the current month. So now I'll pick current month. And now, of course, I can browse with whatever else I want. I can have product categories. I can have my geographical areas. And turns out the current month only has bike sales. AdventureWorks data is a little funny, of course. And of course, AdventureWorks isn't actually the right time period either. I mean, what is current month? Another way of looking at this is to say, let's see, I'm going to put, well, before I leave this, please get the point of this. What this does is it allows you to create say you have an organization where the most important thing for people is to see the current month, or to see the current 3 months, or the current year. You can create pivot tables and Excel spreadsheets or whatever other client you have, and have it sliced on the date you want to use, the date type, and the date period being the current month. And whenever they open that up, they're going to see the current month. And so it keeps on, from month as the months change, it keeps giving the time period that the individuals want to look at for that particular view of the data. But now I'm going to just, again, take this and move us up here and bring, I want to bring the actual date calendar down into the rows. And I'm going to, it so happens that that AdventureWorks has another measure called Internet Extended Amount, which always has the same values as Internet Sales Amount. But in my demo here, or when I wrote this code, I'm not applying my calculations to Internet Extended Amount, which gives you the ability to compare. So, if I had not had, if I was not using the calculation, which I'm not using it on Internet Extended Amount. That is showing the actual values for each time period. On Internet Sales Amount, I am, I'm limiting it to current month, and so we see March 2007. I realize it's not March 2007, but I have my database to take the current date minus 8 years, so it works with AdventureWorks. That's easier than adventuring, and then updating AdventureWorks to have the current dates. So, and then, obviously, the same thing here. We could pick the current 4 months. If they say, well, we want to see a little more data, then it's going to show back only data for the current 4 months. But recognize that normally when you're using this type of calculation hierarchy, we're not looking at the calendar dates, because the purpose of the calculation hierarchy itself is to limit which part of the time period we're looking at, so that we can go on and then and see our data in the particular time period that we want to see it. The other things we have here are, let's see, I'm going to put the values down here, and again, put date calendar. Okay, and then again, I'm going to put, no, I actually think it'd be better to do it the other way around. I'm going to put the date types. The date types, no, the date periods. Okay, that's what I want to see, I think. When you have a limited space, which of course we always have a limited space, it can be kind of hard to get at it. Okay, but again, the benefit of all this is we can move it around, we can pivot and so forth. And let's see, if we hide that, we'll have a little more real estate. Again, current year, current month, current 4 months. Of course, previous month, same month last year. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious what that's doing. Year to date. Year to date is a little different. If I put it back up here and just pick year to date, I'd like to show you that one. So if I'm looking at year to date, and I drill into 2007 to what my notional current date is. I get here to March 4th, 2007, and internet sales amount is showing 980,000. But notice how current date is working. If I go back to January 1st, it shows the same value as if I didn't apply the calculation. But then every day after that, it's rolling it up to that day. So when I do a year-to-date calculation, and you know, I don't see people doing this too much, but people do find this useful, is that you can see how the year-to-date thing has changed from day to day, and from each individual day, you can look at it. Of course, obviously, you could take the average of that, if the average daily sales, if you wanted to look at that, or but let's see. I take my filtering off there. Okay, somehow I lost my fields. I didn't want to do that. Okay, get back to my fields. And January, February. If you look at the value for March 4th, it's 980,000. And that is, in fact, the value that's going to show for the all member, 980,000. That is the year-to-date, its sales as of March 4th. And again, it's showing that because that's the way I programmed it, so that not only can we show the roll-up from day to day, but I can put, if I'm using it not with the calendar itself, but again, looking at my products, I can see, you know, so I have year-to-date up here as a filter, then I'm showing year-to-date as of March 4th, the sales that we have through that period. And again, we could go on. It's really, these other things are derived from that. Same month last year, year-to-date last year, percent change in the previous month, percent year-to-date change last year, the previous year, 6-month rolling average, current year projection. The current year projection takes where we were at this point last year, where we were at this point this year, what the total was for last year, and then, you know, applies that to a total that we are projecting for this year. I heard a presentation once at the past conference from an executive back in the days when ProClarity was a separate company, and he talked about the most valuable thing to do as a designer of a cube is to get in with a company and look at the executives as they're looking at their spreadsheets. There are piles and piles of spreadsheets, but not look at what's on the spreadsheets, but look at the notes that the executive is scrawling on the side of it. What is he calculating? You know, what is he doing with the month's profit and with last month's profit and with year-to-date? You know, what are the little calculations he wants to apply to the data? And that's the question that we can ask, and the opportunity that we have to ask when we're working with calculation hierarchies. We can tell people, what is it that you really want to know about a particular place? And once we know that, once we put that in, we can apply that calculation to any combination of values from any other of the dimensions. You know, there was an excellent presentation yesterday on building the hierarchies in the tabular model, and you know, we're doing with the budget thing. You know, but of course the challenge in that is that all those dimensions had to be hooked up. You know, all those factors to be able to filter on them. What you do with a multidimensional model is you get all the dimensions hooked up, and then you can apply calculations and have any kind of intersection of the various hierarchies and achieve what you want to do. I see that I'm roughly half done with my time, and I want to switch over to my demo of actually building a calculation hierarchy. And again, as just mentioned again, I got all these slides, which I haven't shown you many slides yet. Sorry about that. You missed out on the slides. But the slides are kind of doing the same things that I'm talking through. So I think the slides are, could be valuable for you to help remember the sorts of things that I'm saying. So if you're interested, please download them when they get to be available. Okay, I'm going to go and build a calculation hierarchy from scratch, just starting out. And I'm in a place where I'm going to do the simple one where I have I showed the code for previously, where we have the actual and the trend and a goal that's based off of the trend. So the trend is based on the actual values, and then we calculate the goal based on the trend. So to begin with, I'm working inside here the Microsoft Data Tools. I'm connected up directly. I have a direct connection to Analysis Server Cube. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to make a new name query. Now, this is a very simple little query. I'm going to say select actual as test name, 10 as test. I'm just going to, I'm basically manufacturing data here for the members of the calculation hierarchy. So then I'm going to do actual, and I'm going to do a trend as test name, 20 as test. The second value is going to be the key, of course, and goal as test name, 20 as test. And I'm going to call this thing test. I like to call things test because that way I don't have to decide what to call it. And often we change our mind later on what it's supposed to be called anyway. So change to 20 to 30. How about, man, I'd have a processing error there, I tell you. OK, so I made the table. Now I'm going to make a new dimension that uses that table. Thank you very much, by the way. I don't always get things right the first time. OK, so I'm just going to take test as the key column, and the test name will be the name column, and that looks good. And I'm going to, hey, look at that. It's going to be called test. That's wonderful. That's what I want. So I'm going to have a dimension called test. It's going to have a hierarchy called test. And there are just a few properties that I have to change here. And one of them is aggregatable. I don't want my actuals and my goal and my trend to be added up. Never. I don't want. This is not aggregatable. So that's going to be set to false. I don't want to order by name. I have a key there that I built. One of the purposes I built my key was so I could order on it. So, OK. Let me see if I can control that. There it is, key. And I need to change one more property, but I can't change that property until I've actually saved and processed my cube. So I'll do that now. Or, so not the cube, the dimension. And again, with the direct connection that I have, let's see if I can grab that. Yes, it succeeded. I have my beautiful new dimension with 3 measures. And the other thing I need to change, I have to come back here then and change the default because, oh yeah, and I need to select the attribute to do that. So I want the default member, I want it to be the actual. And one of the things, you're doing calculation hierarchies, you never roll them up so that they're non-aggregatable, and they always need a default member. And of course, you want the default member to be what it would be if you didn't have the calculation hierarchy. That's very basic. It's very fundamental. It's the way it has to be. Okay, so we have our wonderful hierarchy with three members. And now we put it in our cube. So we open up our cube, we go to the cube structure tab, and we add a cube dimension. So there it is, test, OK. We have to process the cube to get the new dimension in there. So it saves it, we process it, and we're done. So now notice in the dimension usage tab, this is one of the key things about dimension hierarchies, is that the question is, which of our measure groups do we relate our calculation hierarchy to? Right now, it's not related to any of the measure groups. And that's exactly the way it should be. Because it doesn't need, it's something that when I first heard about this, it seemed kind of strange to me. And in fact, when we first had the earliest versions of analysis services that allowed us to do this sort of thing, you actually did have to hook it up to the dimensions with a fake sort of key, and then but now you don't have to. It doesn't, these calculations, they're not really related to the data directly at all. So we don't need to have any relationships to any dimensions. And I think, let's see. Not connected, OK. As I go through this demo, I want to just to show you what it looks like at each step as we're building the calculation hierarchy. So I'm going to do select test.test.members on rows. And then I want to show all the dates on the columns. And this is actually, I'm building this out of the fiscal hierarchy. So I'm going to do date.fiscal. To start with, I'm just going to do all the members of the fiscal date dimension on columns from AW. I got tired of typing AdventureWorks with a space, and so I changed it to AW in my modified version. So I really want it the other way around. So OK. We see a bunch of nulls starting out because there are nulls in the data in that area. So when we actually get down to where there is data, at least May 2008, 2007, date.fiscal. Well, date.fiscal members. I'm thinking, oh, of course, I forgot to put in the measure. It's using the default measure, which is reseller sales, which has a different, it's missing data from most of the days. But I really want to do internet sales amounts so we get more data. And there it is. There's what I want to see. So notice that right now, actual, trend, and goal are all the same. And they're all the same. They all are showing the data as if we hadn't used internet, if we hadn't used that hierarchy at all, because the hierarchy is doing absolutely nothing. We did the hierarchy, we joined it in, but right now it isn't doing anything. The first thing I want to actually do with it is to initialize it. So we do this in the MDX script. And let's see. I need to open up this cube again. So let's see, here we go. Calculations. I use the script form of the calculations in the MDX script. And so I start a scope statement. And the scope I'm going to use is my, my two calculations. You know, the actual I'm going to leave by itself because I always want actual to show what it really is. But so I'm going to take trend, which is number 20, and I'm going to take goal, which is number 30. And I'm actually writing this as if it was a range, which is a little bit easier. But also, I usually do have a range. I usually have lots of these. And in this case, there's just 2 of them. But so I finish that scope. And then inside this script, what we use is this a little odd expression, I think. But I say, this equals null, which means wherever, if I ever find the trend or the goal anywhere in the cube, whatever time, in this slice of the cube or this scope, I want to return null. End of story. So I save that and flip back over here. And I'm going to just do a new query in case we want to go back and look at the queries that we already ran. Hopefully it's done now. And in fact, it is. There it is. Now, before, wherever there was an actual value, we also had a trend and a goal value. Now the trend and the goal are null. And anywhere, it's going to be null. And it's always important. I mean, there's other ways of doing this. You could put the null portion in some other way, but this is the most efficient way of initializing. Just set it to null to begin with. So then, to save time, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in a couple times. And I'm going to modify it. I'm going to say for the first block, I'm going to use for 20. And the second block, I'm going to use for 30. And I like to do what I called using a template when I develop code, because you know, so often with people with MDX, I suppose it's probably true in other stuff they do too, is they make things so complicated. I mean, I do it sometimes too. I try to write a big block of code, and then it doesn't work, and I have to go back and figure out what in the world I do wrong. So I find it a lot easier, and if you don't know MDX very well, it's even more important. Just keep it simple when you're starting out. So if it's 20, I'm going to assign 20. If it's 30, I'm going to assign 30. But there's one other thing I want to add in here now. It's that I don't want this apply to all my measures. I just want it to apply to some of my measures. And I could list out some measures, but I'm going to actually do a different function here. The measure group measures function. I'm going to say, if this measure is from the internet sales measure group, then I'm going to I want to apply these calculations. So I do an end scope down here. Notice now I have embedded end scopes. So of course, to have beautiful code, we should indent it. And oh yes, that's what I like to see. And we'll save that. It's good practice, of course, to test. There's a button here to test the syntax before you actually save it. But again, hopefully I got it right. And so now, if I run this query, what I'm going to expect to see is 20 and 30. And I see 20 and 30 even if the actual is null. And you notice I see 20 and 30 whether it's a day or a month or a quarter or half year or fiscal year, because what I said in that code, again, for number 20 and number 30, as long as it's something from the internet sales measure group, I want to see 20 and 30. So, but the key thing here is it's not rolling up. You know, normally you expect if there was a 20 for each of the days of January, then January should be something with 620. But I have said no. Any place there's a trend of the goal, I want to see 20 and 30. Well, obviously that's not what I really want to see, but there's actually one other step in this before I make it correct, and that is that for the trend, this trend, I want this to apply to the dates. Okay, and I need to reconnect because I've been saving this. I want it to be my fiscal dates, and I want to apply it on the month because I'm doing this month thing. I'm doing month, a trend over a certain period of months. So I don't want it to apply to every member of this hierarchy. I would just want to apply it to the months. And if I do it like that, again, just to look pretty, we'll indent again. So, but again, you read this code and you say, wherever in my cube, I'm going to slice my cube on measures out of internet sales. Wherever one of those measures, secondly, wherever I have a member of the month level of the fiscal date hierarchy, and wherever I have a 20, a test value of 20, again, the trend, I'm going to display the value 20. So we save that, and again, come back over here. New query, paste it in. Now, yes, good. Now, for the trend, it is aggregating. And of course, I assigned it on the month level, so I didn't do anything with days, so the days are null. That's what I want to see. The months are going to roll up into quarters, into half years, into fiscal years. Actually, though, when I think about that, if I'm looking at a monthly trend, I don't want that to roll up. I want it to stop. I don't want to be below month. I don't want to be above month. I just want to see a monthly trend. And so I have to do something about these higher levels. So I'll come back in here, and I'll copy this, what I did for month. And because of that, I would like to set them to null at higher levels. But that's a problem when you browse it in Excel. So I don't have a lot of time to talk about that. But what I typically do is I set it to all the higher levels. And one of the ways of referring to all the higher levels will be to say descendants. I'll take the descendants of, reconnect. I want the descendants of all my date fiscal periods. And I want that down to the level of a month, except I don't want to include months, so I'll do before. The before flag says anything above month, I'm going to do this. And now I'm going to set this to null again. So I initialized to null. I set it to 20. Now I'm sending it back to null. It's the most efficient way of doing it. So we go back over here. Hopefully I'm still not making any mistakes because I don't have time to make mistakes. And we run it again. So now it did not work. So what did I do wrong? Yes, an error in the script. What did I do wrong? Scope, all periods, month before. I missed a closing parentheses. And of course, I actually did not want to set it to null. I just talked about that. I want to set it to NA because that will display much better when I run this in Excel. Okay, this time I'm going to actually wait to make sure it doesn't error. That looked good. And this is what I want to see. So I have a value showing for the trend on the month level. I show nulls below that. I show NA on higher levels. And of course, now finally, I can get to the place of actually doing the calculation. But hey, sometimes it takes a while to get to the calculation. What is the calculation? Well, I could do it. Well, I prefer to do it with the sum divided by the count. In this case, to save time, I'll just do the average. And I'll say what I want is from date.fiscal. I want to take the current member, and I want to do a lag 12. And there are actually different ways you could do this, but I think probably the most common way is to say, all right, we're going to go 12 months. We're going to start at the previous month, and we're going to go back 11 more months. So we'll go back 12 months, and we'll end with the previous month, and we'll call that, we'll take the average of that. And then the question is, well, what actually are we taking the average of? Well, we're taking average of whatever measure we're currently using. We actually don't even need to say this, but to make it really clear, we can say, well, we're going to average whatever the current member happens to be at that time. And though, if there's one thing, when you go back and do this at home and you have fun with this, this is not going to work. And it actually is the thing that most people find the most troubling in trying to build a calculation hierarchy is that the syntax for end is incorrect. That most likely, let's see, what did I do wrong? I average lag to lag 1, measures.current member. I forgot my semicolon. Yeah, you missed the punctuation, and it will not work. So save it. And this isn't going to work even at this. Or what it's going to return is a bunch of null values. In some versions of analysis services, this returns a recursive error. In the version I'm running here, the more recent version, it just returns nothing. And see, there it is on the month value. It returns nothing. And it returns nothing. It looks like it should be a good average calculation, but the fact is that when we're doing this, we need to start someplace, and we need to start where there's real data, because in the calculation I didn't reference any member from the test hierarchy. But when you build a calculation hierarchy, you always have to, in your calculations, you have to reference the default measure. Absolutely, because that's the only measure that really has data in it. We set everything else to null. So if we calculate on null, we're going to get null. But if we cross-join, the star here is for a cross-join, we join every member we're looking at from the fiscal hierarchy with the original actual values, then everything's going to be okay. So instead of having nulls here with January, it's still null. Okay, that wasn't very good. Oh, of course. It's still null because there wasn't any values back there in January of 2005. So my demo didn't, I didn't really give you a valid demo there because I didn't really show you that there really were nulls, but I'll tell you there really were nulls, and I don't have time to go back and show that again. We actually are, though, almost done because we have that one working the way we want to, and now all we have to do is with 30, our goal, instead of being assigned to 30, we want to assign it to 20 times 1.2. And we do that. And again, I missed the semicolon the second time today. So now we get an error here. The following system error occurred, type mismatch. Okay, test type. And now I'm going to cheat and go back and look at what did I actually do before. And I did exactly the same thing that I have done now. So that's the sort of thing that's hard to figure out in the last 5 minutes of a demo. Times (1.2 times). Just, try that one more time. Okay, I do see the problem. It's because I forgot to limit this one also by month. I had to limit both by month because I was assigning these NA values. NA values are strings. I better not be multiplying my NA values. So that way I'll just add in the additional assignment of the month, and hopefully, if I'm fortunate, we'll now actually get values. And we do for the goals. We get the values for each, again, for the month, for the values, for the lower than the month, again, we're showing null. Higher than the months, we'll, I'm just going to get rid of the dates here, the individual dates, because they are getting in the way of our looking at things. So I'm going to take date fiscal. A real shortcut way of doing this is saying I'm going to subtract out all the individual dates from this set. And so now we just see from the months and above, which is this is what I want to see. On the trend, I want to see values just at the month level. For the goals, it's fine for them to aggregate up to higher levels. I want to see goals at higher levels. I don't want to see the trend at higher levels because the trend is based on a rolling number of months. And now the only thing that's wrong is, again, as I said, the formatting disappeared. In this case, formatting disappeared on the goal. It did not disappear on the trend, but it's very easy to get the formatting back. And what that is to say, format string of this equals currency. And then that should take care of the formatting. I did actually not finish the demo. I wanted to go on and show how I could do a separate calculation hierarchy with a number in it, where instead of having like a 6-month roll-up, I could have a separate calculation hierarchy that would allow me to pick the number of months that I want to use for the roll-up. And so instead of having, in this case where I put in, well, I guess I was using a 12-month roll-up. Instead of using a 12-month roll-up, I could use a syntax of referring to the selection that the user picked in another hierarchy. So a lot of times people, well, it appears that when you're working with a pivot table with a cube, that you can't have parameters. Well, you actually can have parameters in cubes, because you can make separate hierarchies with lists of those parameters that you pick, and then you can reference those parameters in your calculations and apply them. So I can have a hierarchy. I can show a 2-month roll-up, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and let my user pick whatever number of months they want to roll up, rather than as I've seen in some places, you have all the calculation measures for the 3-month roll-ups, the 6-month roll-ups, the 12-month roll-ups, the 18-month roll-ups, and so forth. I feel like I've talked kind of quickly, and I am out of time. I hope that I have at least partially answered the questions that I tried to answer here, to tell you about analytical hierarchies, to show you how they can be used, and to give you an introductory class on how to use them. And I know you can't just go home with that much of a class and actually do it, but I hope you realize that you could do it. And if you have a situation where your users could benefit from it, I encourage you to go ahead and try. So, thank you very much. And I guess, again, the time being up, if there are any questions, please come and talk to me here in front. Thank you.